Alright, I'm going to try to do a build video on how to make a knife. Had a guy, friend of mine, tell me that he's kind of interested in getting into knife making. And while there's a gazillion videos out there on how to do it, figured I'd go ahead and start one. So, gonna make a basic utility knife, kitchen style knife, pretty small. So basically what I do is I just draw out what I want to do on paper. I don't always do it this way, but this time I did. Sometimes I just take the Sharpie straight to the steel. Anyway, I drew the template in the house, transferred it over to the steel that I'm using, and this is a 5/32 thick 1095 high carbon steel. I get my steel from Admiral Steel. It's a company out of Illinois, I think. They sell blade steels. Of course, there's Jant Supply, New Jersey Steel Baron. There's all kinds of different steel suppliers. This is just the one I use. I get these come in like 9-foot bars for 20 bucks, 25 bucks, something like that. I mean, it's a really good steel, but it's cheap because it's so easy to make compared to some of your high-end stainless steels and other crazy alloys and stuff. And what I'm doing here now, I'm trying to do something different with a hand. I'm always trying to do something different. But what I've done is I've taken a block, sorry, 1 second. I took a piece of Brazilian cherry and a piece of African whinge, at least I think it's an African wood, and I just glued them together and then marked where I wanted the length of the handle, cut it, and then I drew on the top a shape, kind of like an S pattern shape, cut it out on the bandsaw, and then I cut a piece of this red vulcanized paper, and what you do is you mix match the colors. So now you put the puzzle back together, but you've got two different pieces of wood, and I've got a piece of that red vulcanized paper in between. So that should be pretty cool. You got to clamp it on two sides, otherwise it'll just fall off. And so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to chuck this up and use my drill press here. I'm going to go ahead and, while the steel is an even, I think this is 1.5 inch, it'll clamp in the vise a lot better that way. Because a lot of times what I'll do is I'll cut it out and I'll forget to drill. Then I go to chuck it up in the vise and it doesn't like these little curves, and your steel wants to move inside the vise. So I'm going to go ahead and drill now. And then I'm going to cut this out. I don't have a steel blade for my bandsaw yet, so I'm just going to do it how I always do with a angle grinder and cut-off wheel. And my assistant's here. Joseph, you want to say hi?
Hi.
Yeah.
And look, I tied these both together.
Okay, bub. So I got a cut-off wheel and an angle grinder. Just make straight cuts, you know, where you can. Sorry, I'm not used to holding the phone and doing all this. I just kind of make a straight cut this way, and then a straight cut this way. Cut it here. It's a lot of cutting. And then clean it up on a grinder, and then go to one of my various belt sanders. I got the little. You can do the entire job on this belt sander. This one is very cheap. I don't even remember. I think it was like $30 or $40 from Harbor Freight. It's a 1x30. Not very powerful, but it does have some good speed to it. You can get all different size grits belts. This was given to me. This is a 4x36. It used to be a combo with a disc and the sanding belt, 4x36 sanding belt, and I pretty much took it apart. I don't use the little plate that's on here. I just do everything by freehand. And then I bought this. This is an old Sears and Roebuck. No telling how old this thing is. This is a 6x48. So this is kind of my setup. And yes, it is disgusting and disorganized and dirty and filthy in here. I know that. I'm well aware of that. It's really hard to keep it clean. I'm working out of this tiny little shed. I mean, that's what I work out of. It's just a tiny little shed, so no ventilation or anything like that. So all the dust just kind of settles and I sweep every now and then. That's my coal down there. This is my forge. It's a brake drum forge that's down inside of a grill. Did you find some more coal for me, buddy?
Yep.
Yeah. You've been digging coal out of the ground, haven't you? No, no, no. Don't touch that stuff, bud. It's not hot right now, but it's very dirty in there. So, brake drum, and it's got 2-inch piping underneath that goes to a hairdryer. Very basic, very simple, cheap to make. But with a knife this size, you can very easily do your heat treat with a store-bought propane torch. This will run you, I don't know, $15, $20 at Lowe's. And I've got an ammo can over here full of used motor oil that I use to heat treat. But we'll get through all that. I'll go ahead and get started, and we'll go from there. A quick update. I got the blank roughly cut, and I got my scales going here. So they moved on me when I glued them, so they weren't exactly straight. So I spent a lot of time just holding it flat against that to flatten the sides that I'm going to have glued, but that's kind of what it's going to look like once it's done. It's pretty neat. I've seen lots of guys do that, but never done it myself. Totally an easy way of doing it. And here's the blank. It's probably still hot, so let's go ahead and give it a dunk. Get a better look at it. So all I did was, with the angle grinder, cut the straight lines that I could, and you can see where I kind of chewed away some of the material. Sorry, that's really bad quality. And that just makes it easier for the grinder, the grinding wheel, because the cutoff wheel just eats that stuff away. So anyway, that's the next step. We're going to turn this grinder on here and clean up those lines. And then it's time to mark where we're going to make the bevels for the edge. And then any file work, if you're going to do any kind of file work, like a lot of times you'll see knives that have fancy file work on the back here. Now is the time to do it while the steel is still soft, annealed. You go to harden it and temper it, and you're going to ruin your files. I mean, it'll still do the job, but you'll really wear out your files at that point. So, that's what's next. Sorry, I was in autopilot there for a minute. Forgot I was trying to record all this. So, I got it all shaped up on the grinder. Really bad quality. Anyway, got it shaped up on the grinder. And taking it to the sander. What I do, because that grinder is so much more powerful than these belt sanders, I usually kind of take a lot of the material out that I'm going to be grinding smooth anyway. I'm not sure how deep I'll go with this bevel. I'm already almost to the middle. I might go to up here, or I may do the whole grind. I don't know, may do a full flat grind. It's not very thick steel, it shouldn't be too hard to do, it just takes more time. But the full flat grind will cut much better. It'll take an edge, it'll take a super edge, but it won't be as tough as like a, I think this is considered like a saber grind or a Scandi grind. I'm not really up to speed on all my terminology. But anyway, yeah, just using the little Harbor Freight. It's a, and this is terrible quality. Little 1x30 belt sander from Harbor Freight. Of course, took all the guards and crap off, which is the first thing I do. I did leave this plate on here for this one, because it is nice to have something to rest against when I'm doing this, the fine work, the small stuff. But yeah, that's where we're at. So I'm gonna get back to it. Hi, say hi, bub.
Hi.
Alright, so all the beveling has been done. Not all, because you actually leave a thin strip along here. You don't file it down or sand it down to its edge before you heat treat, for a number of reasons. Mainly because you don't get consistent heat from the time you get it to the color. It's like a red, cherry red, which is around 1500 degrees for this type of steel. Basically, you wait till it's non-magnetic and then it's hot enough for quench. But if you have that really, really thin, by the time you get it out and ready to go into the oil, it's already cooled off. Or you can get it too hot. It's easy to get it too hot, and then when you quench it, it'll have stress cracks, and it'll be real brittle even after tempering. There's a whole list of reasons why you do this, but I'm sorry, this video is terrible. I don't know why it's so terrible. Just going with the theme of doing this stuff with cheap tools, I'm going to go ahead and heat treat it with this propane torch. I'm going to get it hot. So what's going to happen is that the edge portion is going to get to the right temperature, but the back isn't. And that's perfectly fine. I think the term for that is differential heat treatment, where the edge becomes glass hard, or a portion of the edge, but the spine stays fairly soft, and that makes for a super strong and flexible knife. Typically I put it in the forge and I get the whole thing that color and quench it, and then the whole blade is hard. The handle's not, but the whole blade gets hard. But if I'm doing a large knife, or one that I plan on doing a lot of chopping or splitting wood with, then that's when I'll definitely do the differential heat treat to maintain a lot of flexibility in the back. So yeah, I'm going to heat it up, and I'm going to dunk it in the oil, and it'll be hard as a file. Okay, welcome back. I gave up on the torch because it was taking a long time, and I didn't want to jeopardize the heat treat. So I did fire up the forge with the help of my assistant, and this is what it's going to look like afterwards. That is, if you do it in motor oil. If you use quenching oil, it's a little bit different, but used motor oil is basically a free item that I can get. Quenching oil is not necessary for the steel that I use. And the way you check to make sure you got a good heat treat, heat it up to 1500. Again, this is for 1095. If you're using special steels, it'll be a little bit different. I look for the color, which is like a red, early orange stage color, and then I check it with a magnet. If the magnet doesn't stick to it, and it's not like a bright orange, if it is a bright orange, I let it cool back down till the magnet does stick a little bit, then I put it back in, check it again till the magnet doesn't stick to it, and then I dunk it in oil and kind of move it back and forth in the oil, let it cool faster, and take it out. And if there was already stress in the blade before you did it, it'll come out warped. So some of the stuff that I forged and I didn't properly normalize would come out crooked. But anyway, yeah, this is how you check if you got a proper hardness, is you get another file. And I usually like to use one of my chainsaw files because it's real sharp. And you actually try to file where the edge is, and it should slide over it just like glass. So then I'll check it down here where I didn't heat treat, and you'll feel it bite. It has that kind of bite where it's actually cutting metal, and up here it just slides right off. Now if you do get it to where it's biting in here and you don't see much difference down here, you didn't get a good heat treat, so you need to try again. Otherwise you just did a whole bunch of work for a blade that's not going to hold an edge. So now I got to clean all this up, and I'm going to throw it in the oven at, for this one, probably about 375. And that's the tempering process. It's going to, because if I drop this on the ground hard enough, it could actually break. It's at its hardest point. It's like glass at this point. So I'm going to throw it in the oven for 375. Some guys do 350 for ones that they're not going to do any kind of stress work on. But if you're going to have a larger blade or something that is going to take a lot of stress, you're going to want to go a lot higher than that, like 450, 500 range. And with the 375, what I'm looking for is a straw color and almost into the kind of purple colors. And that lets you know that the blade got to the proper temperature for tempering. And there's a chart, you can look it up on there. There's a chart really for steel changes colors depending on what temperature it is. And there's visible colors, and then there's the colors that happen after it's around 1500 degrees and you get the glow. But anyway, I've talked enough. I'm going to go ahead and get to work. Alright, now what I'm doing is I haven't tempered it yet. I'm actually getting the scales formed so I can kind of sand on them while this is in the oven. I temper at an hour, by the way. I don't know if I mentioned that. I've got a piece of copper somewhere. I swear I set things down. I have no idea what I did with them. Jeez. Just a second, bub. Anyway, I'll find that, but my handle pin material is going to be 3/32 copper. So I've got a 3/32 drill bit, and I've got the wood vice gripped down to the handle, and I've got the handle chucked up in the vise here. That way I get a nice 90-degree angle hole. I don't know how the best way to describe it. Basically, we're getting a clean hole that isn't going to look like it's in a different spot on the other side of the handle. And then I'll repeat for the other side. I'll flip the blade over, clamp it down to this, and drill through that way. And then what I do is I take the blade out of the equation, put the scales together, put the pins through them, and I can see how they're going to look when they're on the knife. Joseph, will you be patient? Thank you. And then I'll do any kind of sanding or shaping I need to do to make sure those scales are going to look exactly the same, and that this joint here will look like it's on the same side. Well, it will be on the same plane as the other scale. So I'm going to do that and we'll get back. Alright, I'm ready to go inside and use the oven. I got this little toaster oven. And if you're going to use it... Sorry, bub, I'm doing a video. If you get a toaster oven, I'm just going to go ahead and forewarn you to get a thermometer that you can stick on the inside, because these toaster ovens are shit for keeping temperature. Like I've got it pegged out at I don't even know what that is. This is at 450, and yeah, I've got this thing maxed out, and the most I can get out of this toaster oven is like 360, maybe 370. And I'm going to want to go higher than that for this blade, so I'm going to do it inside. If you're going to do it in the oven that you cook your food in, make sure you get as much of the oil from the heat treat off. You can still see I've got a little black in there. Might take a little bit of that off. It's just going to smoke a little bit in the house, smell a little bit like burning oil. So yeah, if you just take it straight out of the fire, out of the oil, and throw it in your oven in the house, you're probably going to set off your smoke alarms, and you're probably going to make your wife really unhappy. So clean off as much as you can. If you can get all of it off, great. I've found that a little bit left over isn't that bad. But yeah, I took the drilled all the wood, got the pins in, traced one scale at a time, cut out some of the material away with my scroll saw here. And so now I definitely need to temper before I forget. I have done that. I have forgotten to heat treat before. Temper, and I've snapped a blade right in half. Definitely need to remember to temper your blades. So anyway, yeah, that's the next step. I'm going to go in. This is going to go in the oven for an hour at 375. I'm going to check the color. If the color's not where I like it, it's going to go back in for another hour at 375. Some guys do 2 cycles for every blade. I typically don't if I get the color that I like. So yeah, I'm going to head inside, do the tempering, and then clean it up. Not the final sanding. If you want to do your final sanding, it's a good time to do it, but then I'm going to clean it up. These are going to get glued on with 2-part epoxy, and then the real work begins of shaping the handle and getting the final bevel and the final edge, and then it's onto a leather sheath. Alright, it's the next day. The next step here is going to be to clean this up. It's out of the oven. took a still picture to try to get better quality so you can see, but I've got that straw kind of color, brownish yellow with the, you see a little bit of purple in there too. And that was at about an hour and 15 minutes probably total at 375 in the oven. So now what I got to do is do the final sanding, get this thing prepped for the handle scales, and then once the scales are on, then you sand them to shape and go through various grits of sandpaper so you get the finish you like. Or if you want to get it stupid shiny, you pull out the I got a buffing wheel on that side of my grinder with a couple different types of rouge. But yeah, so fun stuff. Here we go. I forgot to mention also at this point, since I've already got the temper in the blade, I don't wear any gloves at this point. Reason being, using this on the sanding belt will get this thing very hot, and I want to be able to feel that temperature. If I get this blade too hot while I'm sanding, I can essentially ruin the temper and ruin the blade, basically. And I have to go through it all over again to normalize it, and then heat treat it, and then temper it again. So, no gloves, so I can feel the temperature. Because while I'm sanding this blade, let's see if I can do this one-handed, I'll have my left hand on the handle, and my other hand will be right here next to it. So any high temperature that gets through the steel, I can feel it on the back of my thumb, and then I go straight to the water. So yeah. Alright, I'm ready to glue the handle scales on now.
Yeah, she showed me some designer rings. Designer rings aren't
got the blade all cleaned up. I started at 36 grit to get a lot of the rough stuff out. And then I went to 80, then 120, 240, and then 400. And there'll still be a lot more to do even after the handles get on.
Plus hundreds more exclusive styles without those outrageous
I left the handle portion with the, you can see how it's finer up here than it is down there. I left that with the rough 36 cut because even though it's not much of a difference, that's that much more surface area that the glue is going to be able to get down into and help keep the handle scales on. I don't have the handle scales out here with me, but the other thing that I do is on the inside, like if you were to take the handle scale off and flip it over, on the inside I'll take a drill bit and I'll make small little pock marks in it. And all I'm doing is just giving more room for that glue to stick. And even after the glue's on, the handle pins that I cut, they stick out a little bit, and I'll even kind of peen those down a little bit just to kind of flare them out on the inside to give it even more clamping pressure, and then before I sand them off. Really the glue should do the job 10 times over. That epoxy I think is like a 2-ton epoxy, so that stuff is strong. I've only had one pop off on me before, but it was because the blade was so thin that it was flexing and it actually just kind of popped off. But this handle here is thick enough that it shouldn't really flex. And if it does, the precautions that you take with drilling the holes in the wood and leaving the handle rough and peening the pins down, it should stay on. So that's the next step, is gluing the handles on, and then they set in 30 minutes, but I usually wait at least an hour, sometimes 2 hours. If I can, I'll leave them sit overnight, because the epoxy will be strong enough to keep it on there after about 30 minutes to an hour. But if you get that handle too hot while you're shaping it, you can have the epoxy just have the scale pop right off. So that's what's next. All right, the epoxy is all set. It's been probably about 4 hours now, and I just do the fingernail check. If I can dig my fingernail into the epoxy where it's kind of pooped out here, if I can get my fingernail dug into it, then it's going to be a little risky to go ahead and start grinding and cutting on it. I've done it before and ruined it. I've done it before without any adverse effects, but it's best to wait until this stuff is hard enough that you can't dig your fingernail into it. Honestly, if you're going to do it the right way, you wait 24 hours. But I'm an impatient person, and sometimes I really don't feel like waiting 24 hours. So, gonna grind either here, there, probably there for flatness, because I mean, just the size of that thing, I can fit the whole handle in there. Time to start sanding. All right, welcome back. A lot of the sanding has been done with the machines, anyway. Looks a lot better than it did last time I had the camera rolling. It's basically to shape. I'm gonna profile a little bit more by hand. I got some 80 grit adhesive discs that I just fold over, and then I've got a pile of miscellaneous stuff. I've got this pile goes all the way up to 1500, and I've also got my buffing wheel. But I think I don't know. I'm kind of in a dilemma. I might not use the buffing wheel because it's the only buffing wheel I have. And it tends to darken wood because I use it on metal and it gets black. And I really like the way this wood looks as it is. That's the Wenge and Brazilian cherry. So I may just do everything by hand. Because honestly, now that I've got it to 400 grit, if I get the rest of the profile done, I can go straight to the buffing wheel. And it'll polish it out in no time. But the Wenge is already a dark wood, and it's got a really cool grain. So I think I'm just going to do it all by hand. Got to get my burn marks out. Got the wood a little too hot there on the bottom. But yeah, so about, I don't know, another hour's worth of hand sanding. And then she'll be ready to finish up the blade. Put the edge on it. Do a little bit of polishing, and you've got yourself a knife. Alright, I'm basically done, with at least with the handle anyway. I'm going to put some Danish oil to seal it in. It'll darken it a little bit, but not much. Really happy how this one turned out. Looks really good. I like that two-tone. I'll tell you what, that grain... There you go. The grain in that Wenge wood is just so cool. It's very porous though, but it just has such a cool look. So, the only thing I'm going to do now is I'm going to get the polishing wheel out and hit the blade a little bit. I don't want this thing to be like a mirror shine or anything, but I do want to polish it up and especially get all the crap off of it that's on there now. And it'll also highlight any scratches or anything that I might have accidentally put in there. So yeah, got yourself a knife. It's already sharp too, but when I get it on that buffing wheel, it's going to be razor sharp. And then I'll take it to a real fine stone inside the house. So, there we are. Thanks for watching. I do want to take just a couple seconds here to mention that this cotton buffing wheel, although it's, you know, you can touch it. If you touch it, it's not that bad. This is the most dangerous piece of equipment in any, I won't say in any, definitely in my shop, in most shops. This thing right here will fling blades across the room. It'll suck your hand in with it. It'll suck the blade in if you're holding on real tight. I've polished up handles on here before without taping the blade up like a dummy, holding on to the blade while it was sharp. It'll suck the handle in and slid across my fingers. You can imagine what the result of that was. But this little cotton buffing wheel, if you're not careful, if you're polishing and you turn it too far, when this thing's going high speed, that thing will suck in and throw it straight down. Now this one's got a guard around the back, so it doesn't really kind of wrap around, like it doesn't really go this, kind of like this. It'll get stuck in there. But I've injured myself more times on this than any other piece that I ever use. So a little public safety announcement there for you. Be super careful when using your cotton buffing wheels. Okay, we're wrapping up this knife build here. this will probably be the last video that I do here, so if you watch the whole thing, you'll probably hear me say a lot. And I guess I looked through some of the videos, and apparently I complained about the quality of the video like 700 times. So what can I do? I'm not a public speaker. Anyway, so here's the knife. It's not completely done. The only thing I've got left to do is I've got to burn my maker's mark on it here. But it turned out really nice. I really like the handles. I put the Danish oil on the wood to kind of not seal it in, but protect it. And it kind of sucks because this whinge wood has that real black and dark brown grain pattern, and the dark brown is pretty much gone. It almost looks like all really dark brown / black. But you can still kind of see, you can definitely still see the grain. It just doesn't have that real distinct two-tone look to it. But it still looks great. I mean, I can't complain. The Brazilian cherry, after that, because the Danish oil kind of darkens the wood a little bit, but man, that looks really good. Copper pins are shining, which it won't for long, you know, being in your hand and whatnot. But it feels good in the hand. I've got pretty big hands. I still got room to go down more if I need to. It's not a big knife. It's 8 inches overall. 4-inch blade, 4-inch handle. Actually, it might be 9. 1 second. Nah, it's like 8.5. Sorry. Whatever. And the leather. Definitely not the fanciest sheath I've done. In fact, there's no snaps anywhere on here. But that, I mean, that's cool. I like that. Everything's just sewn up, and it's all one. This was all cut from one solid piece. A little flap folded over and sewn into the side here for a belt loop. And it's kind of, you can see it kind of tapered. It's molded to the knife. Did a few things different, which, I mean, I do things different every time because I'm still learning. But it still has that real good grab to it. Doesn't want to fall out. And I think one of the reasons that my sheath turned out so well this time is I actually made a paper template first, which I never really do that. It's one of those things where it's like, oh yeah, you're supposed to, but I hardly ever do what I'm supposed to do. But I'm glad I did this time because it turned out really good. I've started adding, what's it called? I don't remember what it's called, but it's basically you cut another strip of leather that you put in between where you sew. Because I've noticed that a lot of my buddies' knives that I've made, they don't take as good of precautions as I do when I pull mine out and put them back in to not cut. Because I was putting little brass rivets here, but this is much better. I watched a guy doing this on YouTube. I still can't remember the name of it. It's not that important, but basically it's a little strip of leather that goes on the inside before you fold it over and sew it. And so when the blade goes up and down, if you do kind of twist as you pull up, you hit the leather and not the sinew. So, perfect. Anyway, I'll stop talking. I think I've talked enough. Very cool. I really like this piece. As always, I'd like to keep it, but this one's spoken for. So there we are. Thanks for watching.